My family banned me from Christmas for humiliating my brother when I refused to pretend his business trip excuse was real after I'd seen him at a hotel bar with his assistant in October. And my mother said I was tearing the family apart with lies. Christmas Day. I was reorganizing my closet when I heard knocking so quiet I almost missed it. And there was his wife, Emily, mascara running down her face, holding her phone open to a $4.200 jewelry receipt that definitely wasn't for her. I'm Rebecca Fletcher, 28 years old, and I never expected my own family would exile me for telling the truth. When I opened my apartment door that Christmas morning, Emily stood there shaking, her blonde hair tangled and her Christmas sweater stained with what looked like spilled wine. Behind her, snow fell silently on the empty parking lot, and I could hear carols playing from a neighbor's apartment, a cruel reminder of the family gathering I'd been banned from attending. "I found this in his jacket pocket," Emily whispered, her voice cracking as she thrust the phone toward me. The receipt was dated December 20th, 5 days ago. Cartier. A diamond bracelet. My brother Nathan had told her he was Christmas shopping for his mother. My mother, the same woman who'd called me a liar 3 weeks ago when I'd mentioned seeing Nathan with his assistant. I pulled Emily inside, my hands trembling with rage that had been building since October. That night at the Meridian Hotel bar, I'd been meeting a client for dinner when I spotted Nathan in a corner booth, his hand covering his assistant Melissa's as they laughed over martinis. When I'd approached their table, Nathan's face had gone white, then red, before he'd stammered something about discussing the Henderson account at 9 p.m. on a Friday night. Melissa had smiled at me with those perfectly white teeth, not even bothering to move her hand from under his. I'd told my parents the next day, thinking they'd want to know their son was jeopardizing his 8-year marriage. Instead, my mother had looked at me like I'd committed treason. "Nathan is under tremendous pressure at work," she'd said coldly, arranging flowers in her pristine kitchen. "You saw a work dinner and you're trying to turn it into something sordid. You've always been jealous of your brother's success." My father had been worse. He'd actually laughed, that dismissive chuckle that had marked my entire childhood whenever I'd challenged the family's golden boy. "Rebecca, your brother closed a $2 million deal last month. If he needs to take his assistant to dinner to maintain that momentum, that's called business. Maybe if you focused on your own career instead of sabotaging his, you'd understand that." The family meeting 3 days before Thanksgiving had been brutal. Nathan had sat there in my parents' living room, his arm around Emily, playing the wounded husband while I was accused of spreading malicious rumors. "I've given my family no reason to doubt me," he'd said, his voice steady and convincing, "but Rebecca has always struggled with seeing others succeed. Dad, you remember how she reacted when I got promoted?" Emily had looked at me with such confusion and hurt, believing every word. My parents had nodded along, my mother even reaching over to pat Nathan's hand sympathetically. And then came the ultimatum. Apologize to Nathan for the false accusations and promise to stop spreading lies, or don't come to any family events until I learn to be supportive. I'd refused. I'd stood up, looked my brother directly in the eyes, and said, "I know what I saw." Then I'd walked out, my mother's voice following me. "Don't bother coming to Christmas, Rebecca. We won't have you poisoning the holiday with your bitterness." Now Emily stood in my living room, that receipt clutched in her shaking hand, and I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. My family had chosen Nathan's lies over my truth. They'd exiled me, humiliated me, made me the villain in a story where I was the only one telling the truth. "Rebecca, the bracelet isn't at home," Emily said, sinking onto my couch. "I've looked everywhere. He gave our mother a scarf for Christmas this morning." I watched him. "So where's the $4,200 bracelet?" She looked up at me, her face crumbling. "You tried to warn me, didn't you? At Thanksgiving, when you said you saw them together?" I sat down beside her, my mind already working through possibilities. "Emily, how long have you suspected?" "Since Halloween," she admitted, tears flowing freely now. "He said he was taking clients to a costume party, but his assistant posted photos on Instagram and they were dressed as Bonnie and Clyde, matching costumes. I told myself it was just a work thing, that I was being paranoid." She laughed bitterly. "Your mother told me you were trying to destroy Nathan's career out of jealousy, and I believed her. I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize," I said quietly, pulling out my phone. "You're not the one who should be sorry." I opened my gallery and showed her the photos I'd taken that night at the Meridian. Photos I'd kept as insurance even though my family had called me delusional. Nathan and Melissa, their heads close together, his hand on her knee under the table. The timestamp clear, October 15th, 9:47 p.m. Emily stared at the photos, her face hardening with each image. "He told me you photoshopped these. Your mother said you'd probably hired actors." She looked up at me, and I saw something shift in her expression. The grief was still there, but underneath it, I recognized the same cold rage that was burning in my own chest. "What else do you have?" I smiled, and it wasn't kind. "Everything. Bank statements showing hotel charges, credit card receipts for restaurants he claimed were client dinners, but where you can see 2 meals, always with wine pairings. Text messages I screenshot from his phone at last year's Christmas when he left it on the counter, and I saw Melissa's name. I'd been gathering evidence since that first incident, not knowing why, just sensing I'd need it someday. Why didn't you tell me this before? Emily asked. Would you have believed me? Your in-laws certainly made sure you wouldn't. I stood up, pacing my small living room, but now you know, and now you have evidence. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Emily wiped her eyes, her jaw set in a way I'd never seen before. I'm going to make him tell the truth, in front of everyone. Today, at Christmas dinner. I should have told her it was a bad idea, that confronting him publicly would only make things worse. But I thought about my mother's cold dismissal, my father's laughter, Nathan's smug performance as the wounded innocent. I thought about missing Thanksgiving, being uninvited from Christmas, being erased from my own family because I'd refused to participate in their collective delusion. Then let's make sure you have everything you need, I said, opening my laptop. Because if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. And Nathan is going to lose everything he's so carefully built on lies. Outside my window, the snow continued to fall, peaceful and quiet, while inside, Emily and I began planning the destruction of my golden boy brother's perfect Christmas. My family had wanted me to stop tearing them apart with lies. They were about to learn the difference between lies and truth, and how sometimes the truth tears everything apart far more effectively than any lie ever could. Emily's hands were steadier now as we sat at my kitchen table, my laptop between us, her phone plugged into my printer. The Christmas carols from my neighbor's apartment had shifted to something instrumental and melancholic, fitting for what we were planning. Start with the receipt, I said, opening a shared document. When did you find it? This morning, around 7. Nathan got up early, said he was going to help your dad set up the new grill he got for Christmas. His jacket was hanging in the closet, and something made me check the pockets. Emily's voice was mechanical now, the shock giving way to methodical anger. I called him immediately. He said it was a surprise for me, that he was planning to give it to me at midnight. But Rebecca, he knows I hate expensive jewelry. For our anniversary last year, I specifically asked him not to spend more than $200 on my gift. I made notes, my fingers flying across the keyboard. What did he get you this morning? For Christmas? A KitchenAid mixer. Red, because he said I mentioned wanting one. Emily's laugh was hollow. I mentioned it 3 years ago. I bought one myself last year. The printer hummed as it produced copies of the Cartier receipt. I pulled them out, examining the details. December 20th, 2:47 p.m. The Cartier at Brookfield Plaza, 40 minutes from Nathan and Emily's house, but only 10 minutes from Melissa's apartment building. I knew, because I'd looked up Melissa's address months ago, another piece of information I'd filed away without knowing why. Emily, I need you to look at your bank statements for the past 6 months, joint account, and any credit cards you share. I handed her my tablet. Look for charges you don't recognize, restaurants you haven't been to, hotels, anything unusual. While Emily scrolled through their financial history, I opened my evidence folder. 6 months of documentation, carefully organized by date. Nathan had been careless, or perhaps so confident in his family's blind loyalty, that he hadn't bothered to hide his tracks. The Meridian Hotel appeared 3 times in the past month alone. Rossi's, an expensive Italian restaurant downtown, showed up every other Friday for the past 10 weeks, always charges between $150 and $200, always with wine. Oh God, Emily whispered, her face draining of color. Rebecca, there's a charge here for the Grandview Inn. November 16th. That's the weekend Nathan told me he was at a sales conference in Indianapolis. He sent me photos from the convention center. I leaned over to look. The Grandview Inn was a boutique hotel 30 minutes outside our city, the kind of place that advertised itself as a romantic escape. The charge was $380 for one night. Forward that to yourself, I said quietly, and check your photos from that weekend. Where were you? At my sister's in Columbus. She'd just had her baby and needed help. Emily's hands shook as she typed on her phone. He encouraged me to go, said it would be good for me to have sister time while he was away. He even offered to pay for my gas. The cruelty of it settled over both of us. Nathan had paid for Emily to leave town so he could spend the weekend with his assistant. I added the Grandview Inn charge to my document, cross-referencing it with the photos on my phone from that same weekend. Photos from Melissa's Instagram story showing champagne glasses and rose petals, the kind of romantic cliche that would have been laughable if it wasn't so damning. There's more, Emily said, her voice hardening. The Capitol Grill, October 8th. That's my birthday. He told me he had to work late on a proposal. I spent my birthday alone eating takeout, and he was at a $200 restaurant. I screenshot the charge, adding it to the growing file. Did he ever apologize? Make it up to you? He brought home flowers the next day, grocery store flowers. Emily's eyes were dry now, her grief crystallizing into something sharp and purposeful. He said he felt terrible about missing dinner, that the client had been demanding, but the deal was worth $500 so he couldn't say no. Let me guess, the deal closed successfully? No, actually, he said the client went with another firm. I remember because he seemed upset about it for weeks. Emily looked at me. There was no client, was there? Probably not, I confirmed, pulling up the company directory on my phone. Nathan worked for Davidson Pharmaceuticals, and their client database was semi-public for employees' families. I'd gotten access last year when Nathan had asked me to help with a charity auction for the company. What was the client's name? Henderson Medical Group. I remember because he talked about them constantly in October. I searched the database. Henderson Medical Group had been a Davidson client since 2019, but their account manager was someone named Patricia Voss. Not Nathan. The account had been inactive since August. No new proposals or contracts in progress. Emily, he lied about the client entirely. Henderson hasn't had active business with Davidson since before your birthday. Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression shifted. It's Nathan. He wants to know where I am. He says everyone's asking about me at your parents' house. What do you want to tell him? Nothing yet. Emily silenced her phone. I want to finish this first. I want to know everything before I face him. We worked for another hour, building a timeline that was damning in its consistency. Every late night at the office corresponded with a restaurant charge or hotel booking. Every business trip aligned with gaps in their joint account where Nathan had used his personal credit card, the one Emily didn't have access to. I showed her the Instagram photos I'd screenshot from Melissa's account before she'd made it private, photos of weekend brunches and theater tickets, art gallery visits and wine tastings, all the romantic dates Nathan had never taken Emily on. He took her to see Hamilton, Emily said, staring at a photo from September. I asked him to get tickets for our anniversary in June, and he said it was too expensive. But he took her. Front row seats based on that photo angle, I noted. Those tickets start at $400 each. Emily's phone buzzed again, then again. Nathan was calling now. She let it ring through to voicemail, her jaw set in determination. My mother's calling, I said, looking at my own phone. I answered on speaker. Hello? Rebecca. My mother's voice was acid. Emily left your brother's house hours ago and hasn't returned. Nathan is worried sick. Do you know where she is? Why would I know where Emily is? You banned me from the family, remember? Don't be dramatic. This is serious. Emily's not answering her phone, and Nathan needs to know she's safe. I looked at Emily, who nodded. Actually, Mom, Emily is here with me. The silence on the other end was absolute. Then, put her on the phone. Now. Emily took my phone, her voice steady. Margaret, I'm fine. I just needed some time away from the house. Time away? On Christmas Day? What's gotten into you? Nathan is beside himself, and you're ruining Christmas for everyone with this dramatic stunt. I found something this morning, Emily said quietly. Something that made me question a lot of things. I came to Rebecca because she's the only person who's been honest with me. Honest? My mother's voice rose. Rebecca has been spreading vicious lies about Nathan for months. If she's filling your head with her jealous fantasies, Margaret, did you know Nathan bought a $4, $200 diamond bracelet 5 days ago? Emily's voice cut through my mother's tirade. Because I didn't know about it until I found the receipt this morning. And it's not anywhere in our house. Another silence. Longer this time. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. Nathan probably was planning to surprise me. That's what he said too. Except Nathan knows I don't like expensive jewelry. I've told him that repeatedly. So who's the bracelet for, Margaret? This is ridiculous. Emily, you come back to this house right now and stop letting Rebecca poison your mind. Nathan loves you. He's been nothing but a devoted husband, and you're going to destroy your marriage over a receipt? A receipt? And hotel charges and restaurant bills and an entire weekend at the Grandview Inn when he told me he was at a conference in Indianapolis. Emily's voice remained level, but I could see her knuckles white around my phone. I'm looking at 6 months of lies, Margaret. 6 months of charges for dinners I didn't eat, hotels I didn't sleep in, gifts I didn't receive. You're making wild accusations based on credit card statements? Do you have any idea how business expenses work? Nathan is a senior account manager. He has to entertain clients. On my birthday? At the Capitol Grill while I ate Chinese takeout alone? My mother's voice shifted, becoming placating. Emily, honey, you're clearly upset and not thinking straight. Why don't you come back here? We'll all sit down together as a family and sort this out calmly. Nathan can explain everything. I'm sure there's been a simple misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding was me believing your family for the past 3 months when you told me Rebecca was lying. Emily stood up, pacing my small kitchen. She tried to warn me. She told me she saw Nathan with his assistant in October. And you all made her sound like she was delusional. You banned her from Christmas for telling the truth. We banned her from Christmas because she was trying to destroy her brother's marriage with false accusations. They weren't false, though, were they? Emily's voice was steel now. Rebecca has photos, Margaret. Time-stamped photos from that night at the Meridian Hotel. Nathan and Melissa together, his hand on her knee, looking at each other the way he used to look at me. Rebecca didn't Photoshop those. She didn't hire actors. She took photos of exactly what was happening. and your entire family called her a liar to protect Nathan's image. I heard voices in the background on my mother's end, urgent and questioning, my father's voice demanding to know what was happening, Nathan's voice, higher and stressed, asking if Emily was okay. "Emily, please," my mother said, and I heard genuine fear in her voice now. "Please don't do this. Whatever you think is happening, there's a rational explanation. Nathan has been under so much stress at work, the pressure he's under. Maybe he made some poor judgment calls. But that doesn't mean he's having an affair?" Emily laughed, sharp and bitter. "What does it mean then, Margaret? What's the innocent explanation for 6 months of lies, hidden charges, hotel rooms, and a $4,200 bracelet that isn't for his wife? We can discuss this privately as a family. You don't need Rebecca involved in your marriage problems. Rebecca is the only person who hasn't lied to me," Emily said. "She's the only one who cared enough about me to tell me the truth, even when it cost her relationship with her entire family. So yes, she's involved, because she's been more family to me in the past 3 hours than any of you have been in 3 months. If you're going to take Rebecca's side in this, if you're going to believe her over Nathan, then you're making a terrible mistake," my mother warned. "Nathan is a good man, a faithful husband, and you're going to lose him because you let a jealous woman convince you otherwise." "Then I guess I'll lose him," Emily said quietly, "because I'd rather lose a cheating husband than lose my self-respect by pretending I don't know the truth." She hung up, my phone clattering onto the table. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what she'd just done settling over both of us. "They're going to come here," I said finally. "They're going to try to control this, control you, get you away from me and back into their narrative. Let them come," Emily said, straightening her shoulders. "I'm done being controlled by the Fletcher family narrative. Your brother chose to destroy his marriage. Your parents chose to enable him. And I choose to stop being complicit in the lies." Her phone buzzed again, then mine, text messages flooding in. "Nathan, Emily, please. Mom said you found the receipt. I can explain everything. Just come home and let me talk to you." My father, "Rebecca, what have you done? Your brother is falling apart. Emily is having some kind of breakdown. And it's all because you couldn't leave well enough alone." Nathan again, "I love you, Emily. This is all a misunderstanding. The bracelet was for you. I was planning to give it to you tonight at midnight. Please don't listen to Rebecca. She's always hated me." I showed Emily the messages. She read them, her expression unreadable. Then she picked up her phone and typed a response to Nathan. "If the bracelet was for me, bring it to Rebecca's apartment. Right now. Prove it." We watched the 3 dots indicating he was typing. They appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "It's at the jeweler being engraved with your initials. I can show you the paperwork." Emily typed back, "Show me at Rebecca's apartment. Bring the paperwork. Bring Melissa too, since she's at Christmas dinner with your family. Or did you think I didn't know about that?" The 3 dots stopped. No response came. "He can't bring the bracelet because Melissa is wearing it right now," I said quietly. "That's why he's panicking." Emily nodded, her face set. "Then I guess we're going to Christmas dinner after all, both of us, and we're bringing everything we found today." "Emily, they'll destroy you. My family will close ranks around Nathan. They'll make you look unstable. They'll gaslight you until you question your own sanity. Let them try," she said, standing up and gathering the printed evidence. "I've spent 8 years being the perfect daughter-in-law, keeping quiet, not making waves, believing the best in everyone. I'm done being perfect. I'm done being quiet. And I'm especially done protecting a man who's been lying to me for at least 6 months while his entire family helped him do it." She looked at me, and I saw my own rage reflected in her eyes. "You lost your family by telling the truth, Rebecca. The least I can do is make sure that truth doesn't stay buried. Are you coming with me?" I thought about my mother's cold dismissal, my father's mocking laughter, Nathan's performance as the wounded innocent. I thought about missing Thanksgiving, being uninvited from Christmas, being erased from my own family's story. And I thought about walking into that house with evidence that would blow apart their carefully constructed fiction. "Absolutely," I said, grabbing my coat. "Let's ruin Christmas." The drive to my parents' house took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of loaded silence broken only by Emily's occasional sharp intake of breath as she reviewed the evidence folder on my laptop. Snow had turned the familiar streets into something alien and pristine, a fresh white surface that would soon be stained by what we were about to do. "They're going to say I'm hysterical," Emily said as I pulled into my parents' circular driveway, parking behind Nathan's BMW. "They're going to say I'm overreacting to normal business expenses, that I'm letting you manipulate me because I'm emotional." "Then we let the evidence speak for itself," I replied, shutting off the engine. Through the large front windows, I could see my family gathered in the living room, my mother arranging something on the mantel, probably the Christmas cards they'd received, displayed prominently to show how many important people they knew. My father in his leather chair holding a glass of scotch, Nathan pacing near the fireplace, his phone pressed to his ear. And there, Sitting on the cream-colored sofa was a woman with glossy dark hair wearing a green dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Is that Melissa?" Emily asked, her voice tight. "That's her." I recognized the assistant from the company directory, from the Instagram photos, from that night at the Meridian Hotel when she'd smiled at me with those perfect teeth and not bothered to hide her hand under Nathan's. Emily gripped the evidence folder until her knuckles went white. "She's wearing the bracelet. Look at her left wrist." I looked. Even from the car, I could see the glitter of diamonds catching the firelight. Melissa laughed at something my father said, gesturing with her wine glass, and the bracelet sparkled with every movement. $4,200 of proof that Nathan had bought jewelry for another woman, and she was wearing it at my family's Christmas dinner while my parents smiled and welcomed her like an honored guest. "I'm going to be sick," Emily whispered. "No, you're not," I said firmly. "You're going to walk in there with your head up, and you're going to watch them try to explain why Nathan's assistant is wearing a $4,200 bracelet at a family Christmas dinner. You're going to let them dig their own graves." We got out of the car, and the cold December air bit through my coat. My hands shook as I reached for the doorbell, and I realized with surprise that I was nervous. I'd spent 3 months being shut out, being labeled a liar, being erased from family photos and stories. Part of me had absorbed their narrative, had started to wonder if maybe I had been seeing things that weren't there, if maybe I was the problem. But then I looked at Emily beside me, solid and real and holding evidence that couldn't be explained away, and I remembered I wasn't crazy. I was just the only one willing to tell the truth. I rang the doorbell. The talking inside stopped immediately. Footsteps approached, and then the door swung open. My father stood there, his expression cycling through surprise, confusion, and settling on cold disapproval. "Rebecca, we didn't invite you." "I know. I invited myself." Emily wanted company for Christmas dinner. I stepped forward, not giving him time to refuse entry. Emily followed close behind me, her chin lifted in defiance. My father blocked our path into the house. "Emily, honey, we're all very worried about you. Nathan said you've been upset about a misunderstanding, but running off to Rebecca's was not the right response. Why don't you come in and talk to your husband and Rebecca can go home?" "I'm not going anywhere without Rebecca," Emily said clearly, "and I'm not here to be talked down to or managed. I'm here because Melissa is wearing my husband's gift to her, and I think everyone should see it." My father's face went still. Behind him, I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. Nathan appeared in the hallway, his face pale, his eyes darting between Emily and me with barely concealed panic. "Emily, please, you're making a scene based on a misunderstanding. Show me your wrist, Melissa," Emily called past my father, her voice carrying through the house. "Show everyone the bracelet Nathan bought you." The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the Christmas music playing softly from the living room speaker, some cheerful song about sleigh bells that felt grotesque in its innocence. Through the doorway, I saw Melissa's face drain of color, her hand instinctively moving to cover her wrist. "I don't know what you're talking about," Melissa said, but her voice wavered. "Cartier, diamond tennis bracelet, purchased December 20th at 2:47 p.m. for $4,200. Emily pushed past my father, walking straight toward the living room with me following. "I have the receipt." Nathan left it in his jacket pocket. "What I didn't have was the bracelet itself, because you're wearing it." We entered the living room, and I watched my family's perfect Christmas tableau crumble. My mother stood frozen by the mantel, a Christmas card falling from her hands. Nathan moved to intercept Emily, but she held up a hand, stopping him with just a gesture. "Don't," she said. "Don't say another word until I'm done." Melissa had gone still on the sofa, her hand now clutching her wrist, trying to hide the bracelet, but it was too late. My mother had seen it. My father, following us into the living room, had seen it. And the other guest I hadn't noticed before, Nathan's boss, Richard Davidson, sitting in the corner with his wife, had definitely seen it. "Emily, you're clearly upset," my mother began, her voice taking on that soothing tone she used when she wanted to control a situation. "But making accusations in front of Nathan's employer is not appropriate. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Privately? Like how you privately told me Rebecca was lying? Like how you privately assured me Nathan would never cheat?" Emily's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through every attempt at deflection. "No, Margaret, I'm done with private conversations where the truth gets buried. If Nathan wants to explain why his assistant is wearing a $4,200 bracelet he bought with our joint credit card, he can explain it right here, in front of everyone." Nathan's face had gone from pale to flushed. "Emily, you're embarrassing yourself. That bracelet is costume jewelry Melissa bought herself." "Prove it," I said, speaking for the first time since entering. "Melissa, show us the receipt for your bracelet. If it's costume jewelry like Nathan claims, you must have a receipt." Melissa's mouth opened, closed. She looked at Nathan, a clear plea for help in her eyes. Nathan looked at his boss, then at his parents, calculating whether he could brazen his way through this or if he needed to retreat. "This is ridiculous," my mother said sharply. "You're both ruining Christmas over a piece of jewelry. Even if Nathan did buy Melissa a gift, it's perfectly normal for executives to give their assistants holiday presents. A $4,200 bracelet?" Emily pulled out the receipt, holding it up. "Is that a normal Christmas bonus in your world, Margaret? Because in mine, that's a car payment. That's 3 months of groceries. That's the kind of money you spend on someone you love. not someone who answers your phones. Richard Davidson stood up, and everyone's attention shifted to him. He was a silver-haired man in his 60s, with the kind of presence that commanded rooms. Nathan, is this true? You used company funds or shared marital assets to purchase expensive jewelry for your assistant? No, sir. This is all a misunderstanding. The credit card statement is right here, I said, pulling out my phone and showing the screenshot. October 8th, Capitol Grill, 2 out of $18. That's Emily's birthday. Nathan told her he was working late with a client, but there is no active client meeting that night according to Davidson Pharmaceuticals' internal calendar. November 16th, Grandview Inn, $387. Nathan told Emily he was at a conference in Indianapolis, but Davidson had no registered attendees from your division at any conference that weekend. Richard's expression darkened with each revelation. His wife, Martha, was staring at Melissa with undisguised disgust. Nathan, I think you and I need to have a very serious conversation, Richard said quietly. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., my office. Sir, I can explain all of this. I'm sure you can try. Richard looked at Emily, his expression softening. Emily, I'm sorry you're going through this, and I'm sorry it's happening in front of an audience. Martha and I should go. This is a family matter. Wait, Emily said. Before you go, I want you to know something. Rebecca, Nathan's sister, saw him with Melissa at the Meridian Hotel in October. She told her family, and they called her a liar. They banned her from Thanksgiving and Christmas because she wouldn't pretend she hadn't seen what she saw. They chose Nathan's lies over Rebecca's truth, and they made me believe Rebecca was just jealous. She turned to face my parents. You asked me to distrust the one person who was trying to protect me. You made me feel guilty for even questioning Nathan. And all along, you were helping him hide an affair. We didn't know about any affair, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. We just thought Rebecca was causing problems. By telling the truth? I asked. That's what you call causing problems? I saw my brother with another woman in an intimate setting, and I told you because I thought you'd care that he was destroying his marriage. Instead, you destroyed my relationship with this family to protect his image. My mother's face had gone hard, her lips pressed into a thin line. You've always been jealous of Nathan, since childhood. He was successful, popular. Everything came easy to him while you had to work for every little achievement. This is just another attempt to tear him down. I have 6 months of evidence, I said flatly. Hotel charges, restaurant receipts, Instagram photos, text messages. This isn't jealousy, Mother. This is documentation. Nathan has been having an affair with Melissa for at least 6 months, probably longer, and you refuse to see it because admitting it would mean admitting your golden child isn't perfect. Get out, my mother said, her voice shaking with rage. Both of you, get out of my house. Margaret, my father started. No, I won't have them ruin Christmas with these accusations. Nathan is our son, and we stand by him. If Emily wants to believe Rebecca's poisonous lies, that's her choice. But I won't have them poison this family any further. You've already been poisoned, Emily said quietly. You're just too invested in the lie to admit it. She turned to Melissa, who had been sitting frozen throughout the entire confrontation. Are you sleeping with my husband? Melissa's eyes widened, her hand still covering the bracelet. Nathan and I have a professional relationship. Is that bracelet costume jewelry? Yes, I bought it myself for $4, $200 at Cartier. Emily's voice was steel now, because that's exactly what Nathan paid. Same store, same date, same amount. What an incredible coincidence. Melissa looked at Nathan again, waiting for him to save her. But Nathan was staring at the floor, his jaw clenched, his hands fisted at his sides. Answer her, I said. We all want to hear this. How did you afford a $4, $200 bracelet on an assistant's salary? Did you save up? Did someone gift it to you? Nathan gave it to me, Melissa whispered, and the room exploded. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's scotch glass hit the floor, shattering into amber shards. Richard Davidson's face went purple with fury, and Nathan, my golden boy brother, finally looked up with something like desperation in his eyes. It's not what you think, he said, his voice cracking. Melissa and I, we're just friends. She's been going through a difficult time. Her boyfriend broke up with her, and I was trying to be supportive. By buying her a $4, $200 bracelet, Emily asked. By taking her to the Grandview Inn for a weekend? By having dinner with her every Friday at Rossi's? By spending my birthday with her instead of me? You don't understand the pressure I'm under, Nathan said, and I heard genuine panic now. The expectations, the constant demands, work and home and everyone wanting something from me. Melissa understands that world. She gets it. And yes, maybe I got too close. Maybe I crossed some lines, but it wasn't an affair. Then what was it? Emily demanded. What do you call 6 months of lying, hiding expenses, spending our money on another woman, giving her gifts worth thousands of dollars while I got a mixer I never asked for? What do you call taking her to romantic hotels and fancy restaurants while telling me you were working? If that's not an affair, Nathan, what is it? Nathan's mouth worked, but no sound came out. He looked at our parents, at his boss, at Melissa, searching for someone to give him the right answer. The explanation that would make this all go away. But there was no explanation, no magic words that could undo what had been exposed. "I'm leaving," Emily said, her voice quiet but final. "I'm going to stay at my sister's house. Tomorrow I'm calling a divorce attorney. And Nathan, I'm taking half of everything we built together because while you were busy building a lie, I was busy being loyal." She turned to leave, and Nathan grabbed her arm. "Emily, please, don't do this. We can work this out. I made mistakes, but I love you. Get your hand off me." Emily's voice was ice. "You lost the right to touch me when you decided to touch her." Nathan released her, and Emily walked out, her head high, her shoulders straight. I moved to follow, but my mother's voice stopped me. "This is your fault, Rebecca. All of it. If you just kept your mouth shut, if you just let them work through their problems privately, none of this would have happened." I turned to face her, and I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. "You're right, Mother. If I'd kept quiet, Nathan could have continued his affair in peace. Emily would have continued being humiliated while being told she was imagining things, and you could have continued pretending your family was perfect. But here's the thing, it was never perfect. You just forced everyone to pretend it was, and the only people who paid the price for that pretense were the ones who refused to lie." I looked at Nathan, who couldn't meet my eyes. "You're a coward and a liar, and you deserve everything that's coming to you." I looked at my parents, "And you enabled him. You chose his comfort over my integrity. His image over Emily's happiness. You made your choice, and now you get to live with the consequences. If you walk out that door," my father said, his voice hard, "you're not welcome back. You will no longer be part of this family." "I stopped being part of this family when you called me a liar for telling the truth," I replied. "The only difference now is that everyone knows I was right." I walked out, leaving them standing in their perfect living room with their shattered Christmas, their exposed lies, and their golden boy finally revealed as exactly what I'd always known him to be. A fraud wrapped in my parents' desperate need to believe they'd raised someone perfect. Emily was waiting in my car, tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking. I got in beside her, and she turned to me, her voice breaking. "Thank you. Thank you for not letting them make me crazy. Thank you for being the only honest person in that entire family. I'm sorry it had to happen this way," I said, starting the car. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from it sooner. You tried," she said. "You tried in October and they punished you for it. But you saved those receipts, those photos, all that evidence. You knew I'd need it someday. That's what real family does." As I pulled out of my parents' driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror at the house where I'd grown up, the house where I'd learned that truth was negotiable and image was everything. The lights were still bright, the decorations still perfect, but the illusion of the perfect family had finally shattered beyond repair. 3 days after Christmas, I was working from home when my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Rebecca Fletcher?" The voice was professional, female, unfamiliar. "Yes? This is Jennifer Walsh from Walsh & Associates Law Firm. I'm calling regarding a legal matter involving Nathan Fletcher. Are you available to speak?" My heart rate spiked. "What kind of legal matter?" "Your sister-in-law Emily retained our services for her divorce proceedings. During the discovery process, we've uncovered some additional information about your brother's activities that may be relevant to you personally. Would you be willing to meet this afternoon?" 2 hours later, I sat in a glass-walled conference room downtown, facing Jennifer Walsh, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun, and Emily, who looked exhausted but determined. "Thank you for coming," Jennifer said, sliding a thick folder across the table to me. "What I'm about to show you is disturbing, but Emily insisted you needed to see it. Nathan has been far busier than either of you realized." I opened the folder. The first document was a bank statement for an account I didn't recognize. "What is this?" "A personal account Nathan opened 3 years ago without Emily's knowledge," Jennifer explained. "He's been funneling money from their joint account into this secret account in small, irregular amounts. $20 here, $50 there, never enough to trigger suspicion. Over 3 years, he accumulated $47, $0. I stared at the numbers, my mind struggling to process what this meant. "Why?" "Keep reading," Emily said quietly. The next documents were credit card statements for a card in Nathan's name only. The charges made my stomach turn. Jewelry stores, hotels, restaurants. But the dates went back much further than 6 months. Some were from 2 years ago, 3 years ago. "Melissa isn't his first affair," I said slowly. "No," Jennifer confirmed. "Based on cross-referencing social media data, we've identified at least 2 other women Nathan was involved with before Melissa. One was another coworker named Danielle Reed who left Davidson Pharmaceuticals 18 months ago. The other was a client representative named Sarah Kim. The pattern is consistent. Gifts purchased with the secret account, hotel stays, expensive dinners, all while telling Emily he was working late or traveling for business." Emily's hands were clenched on the table. "I found Danielle on LinkedIn. I messaged her, asked if she'd be willing to talk. She called me yesterday." Her voice shook. "Rebecca, She told me Nathan pursued her relentlessly. He said his marriage was dead, that he was only staying with me until he got his promotion. He promised her they'd be together once he made partner. Then she found out he was simultaneously seeing Sarah Kim, and when she confronted him, he got her fired. Got her fired? I repeated. How? He told HR she was creating a hostile work environment, making unwanted advances toward him, threatening to damage his reputation if he didn't reciprocate her feelings. Danielle said she tried to defend herself, but Nathan had already planted evidence, emails he'd saved where she'd responded to his flirtation, texts he'd carefully edited to make her look obsessed. HR believed him because he was their top performer, and she was just a junior analyst. She was terminated within a week. I felt sick. Does Richard Davidson know about this? He does now, Jennifer said. Emily forwarded all of this to him yesterday, along with testimony from Sarah Kim, who confirmed a nearly identical pattern. Nathan pursued her, made promises, then dissed when she became inconvenient. Sarah chose not to report it because she'd seen what happened to Danielle and was afraid of retaliation. Where's Nathan now? I asked. Suspended pending investigation, Emily said with grim satisfaction. Richard called me personally to apologize. He said if even half of what we've documented is true, Nathan will be terminated immediately. Davidson Pharmaceuticals has a zero-tolerance policy for workplace harassment and financial impropriety. I flipped through more documents, each one revealing another layer of my brother's deception. Hotel receipts going back years, restaurant charges from cities where Emily thought Nathan was at business conferences, but cross-referenced with social media check-ins from Danielle or Sarah. Venmo transactions to Melissa starting 8 months ago, each one labeled innocuously lunch or coffee, but totaling thousands of dollars. Emily, I don't understand. How did he think he'd get away with all this? Because he always has, Emily said bitterly. Your parents covered for him his entire life. Anytime Nathan got in trouble, they smoothed it over. Anytime someone criticized him, they shut it down. He learned early that he could do whatever he wanted as long as he maintained the right image, and there would always be someone to clean up the mess. Jennifer pulled out another document. This is particularly relevant to you, Rebecca. It's a recording of a conversation between Nathan and your parents from 2 weeks ago. Emily installed monitoring software on Nathan's phone after Christmas, and it captured this. I should warn you, it's not pleasant. She pressed play on a small recorder. My father's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. Solution is obvious. We tell people Rebecca has been having mental health issues, document a history of erratic behavior, jealousy toward Nathan, possible substance abuse. That explains why she made those accusations. Discredits anything else she might say. My mother's voice. But what about Emily? She has evidence now. Nathan's voice. Emily's going to look unstable too. I mean, she stormed into Christmas dinner making wild accusations, caused a scene in front of my boss. We frame it as both of them having some kind of breakdown. Maybe suggest Rebecca's been manipulating Emily, feeding her paranoid fantasies. Emily's vulnerable right now. Emotional. We can get her family to help. Convince her she needs counseling, medication maybe. My father. What about the receipts? The hotel charges? Nathan. Business expenses, all of them. I'll have accounting draft revised reports showing each expense was legitimate. Melissa will back me up, she knows what's at stake, and I can explain away the jewelry receipt, say I was planning to surprise Emily for Valentine's Day. Who's going to prove otherwise? My mother. What if Emily files for divorce? Nathan laughing. Let her file. I've got the better lawyers. Her name isn't on half our assets. I made sure of that. The house is in my name only. So is the investment account. Her signature on the joint checking doesn't mean anything for the major holdings. She'll get alimony maybe, but I'll drag it out, make it expensive for her. Eventually she'll settle for whatever I offer just to make it stop. She doesn't have the stomach for a real legal fight. The recording continued, my family calmly discussing how to destroy my credibility and manipulate Emily into silence. When it finally ended, I sat in stunned silence, processing the casual cruelty of it. I'm sorry you had to hear that, Emily said softly. But I thought you should know what they're planning. They're going to tell people I'm crazy, I said numbly. They're going to convince everyone I'm the problem. They're going to try, Jennifer corrected, but we're not going to let them succeed. Rebecca, Emily wants to offer you something. She's filing a lawsuit against Nathan for fraud, emotional distress, and financial abuse. She wants to know if you'd be willing to file a separate suit for defamation and family conspiracy to damage your reputation. A lawsuit against my own family? Against people who are actively plotting to destroy your credibility, Jennifer clarified. Rebecca, they're not just defending Nathan anymore. They're coordinating a campaign to make you seem unstable, to invalidate anything you say. That recording is evidence of conspiracy to commit defamation. I looked at Emily, who met my gaze steadily. They chose their side, Rebecca. They chose protecting Nathan's image over the truth, and they're willing to hurt both of us to maintain that image. I'm done being hurt quietly. Are you? I thought about my mother calling me jealous, my father laughing at my concerns, Nathan's smug certainty that he could explain away any evidence. I thought about being banned from Thanksgiving and Christmas, being erased from family photos, being labeled a liar and a troublemaker for refusing to participate in their collective delusion. What would the lawsuit accomplish? I asked. Financial penalties for damages to your reputation, Jennifer explained. Court-ordered acknowledgement of wrongdoing, public record of their coordination to defame you, and most importantly, legal precedent preventing them from continuing these tactics. They won't be able to spread these narratives about your mental health without risking additional legal consequences. They'll fight it, I said. They'll hire expensive lawyers, drag it out, make it as painful as possible. Probably, Jennifer agreed, but we have something they don't. The truth, documented and time-stamped. We have the recording of them planning their attack. We have 3 years of Nathan's financial fraud. We have testimony from 2 other women he victimized. The truth is on our side, Rebecca, and in a courtroom that actually matters. I looked at the folder of evidence, the years of lies laid bare in black and white. I thought about what my father had said. If you walk out that door, you're not welcome back. They'd already excommunicated me. This lawsuit would just make the break permanent and public. Okay, I said, let's do it. Emily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Together? Together, I confirmed. Over the next 2 weeks, the careful world my parents had constructed began to collapse with devastating speed. Jennifer filed both lawsuits simultaneously, and the local media picked up the story. Pharmaceutical executive faces multiple lawsuits alleging fraud and harassment. The article included just enough detail to be damning, mentioning the secret bank account, the pattern of workplace harassment, and the recorded conversation plotting against family members. Richard Davidson moved faster than anyone expected. Nathan was terminated for cause 48 hours after the lawsuits were filed, with Davidson Pharmaceuticals releasing a statement. We maintain zero tolerance for financial impropriety and workplace harassment. Upon investigation of serious allegations, we have terminated Nathan Fletcher's employment effective immediately. We are cooperating fully with all legal inquiries. The loss of his job triggered a cascade of consequences Nathan hadn't prepared for. Without his salary, he couldn't maintain the mortgage on the house he'd insisted on buying. His professional reputation, carefully cultivated over years, disintegrated overnight as former colleagues distanced themselves. Social media posts from Danielle and Sarah detailing their experiences went viral within the pharmaceutical industry community. My parents tried to control the narrative, calling family members and friends to explain that Nathan was being targeted by vindictive women, that I was mentally unstable, that Emily was having a breakdown, but Jennifer had anticipated this. She'd sent copies of the recording and key evidence to everyone my parents contacted, along with a cease and desist letter warning that any further defamatory statements would result in immediate legal action. My aunt, my mother's sister, called me after receiving the evidence package. Rebecca, I need you to know I believe you, she said, her voice shaking. I knew something was wrong at Christmas when Margaret told me you weren't invited. I called you a troublemaker to your face last year, and I'm so sorry. I should have listened. Other family members followed with similar calls. Uncle James confessed he'd always found Nathan arrogant, but had kept quiet for family harmony. My cousin Sarah admitted Nathan had made uncomfortable advances toward her at a wedding 3 years ago, but she'd been too afraid to say anything because everyone worshipped him. One by one, the perfect image my parents had maintained cracked apart, revealing the rot underneath. My parents didn't call. They released a family statement through their lawyer. The Fletcher family is disappointed by the litigation initiated by Rebecca Fletcher and Emily Fletcher. We believe these lawsuits are motivated by personal grievances rather than facts, and we will defend against them vigorously. But their defense crumbled when Jennifer subpoenaed 3 years of family financial records. The documents revealed my parents had been giving Nathan substantial cash gifts. $10, $1,000 here, $15,000 there, always from their personal accounts, never reported as loans or business investments. When cross-referenced with Nathan's secret account, the pattern was clear. My parents had been funding his affairs, either knowingly or through willful ignorance. They knew, Emily said when Jennifer showed us the analysis. Maybe they didn't know every detail, but they knew Nathan needed money for something he couldn't explain. They gave it to him without asking questions because asking questions would have destroyed their perfect son fantasy. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for late February. My parents arrived with their attorney, a severe man named Roland Crest, who specialized in protecting wealthy families from scandal. Nathan sat between them, looking diminished in an off-the-rack suit, his golden boy confidence replaced by hollow-eyed anxiety. Judge Patricia Morrison reviewed the evidence folders with increasing severity. When she reached the recording, she insisted on playing it in open court. Hearing my parents' voices echo through the courtroom, calmly discussing how to destroy my reputation, was somehow worse than hearing it in Jennifer's office. It was public now, their cruelty exposed to strangers. Judge Morrison looked at my parents with undisguised disgust. Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher, I want to be clear about what I've just heard. You were recorded coordinating a campaign to defame your own daughter by suggesting she has mental health issues, substance abuse problems, and is manipulating her sister-in-law. Is that an accurate characterization of this conversation? My father cleared his throat. Your Honor, that conversation was taken out of context. We were simply discussing family dynamics. You were discussing falsifying evidence of mental illness. Judge Morrison interrupted. You explicitly mentioned documenting erratic behavior that didn't exist and suggesting substance abuse where there is none. That's not discussing family dynamics, Mr. Fletcher. That's conspiracy to commit defamation. Roland Crest stood. Your Honor, the defendants maintain this was a private family conversation about how to manage a difficult situation, a situation they created by enabling their son's fraud and harassment for years, Judge Morrison countered. She looked at Nathan. Mr. Fletcher, do you dispute the documentation showing 3 years of financial fraud against your wife? Nathan glanced at his lawyer, who nodded permission to speak. Your Honor, those were legitimate business expenses that were mischaracterized. You opened a secret bank account and funneled $47,000 into it without your wife's knowledge. You purchased expensive gifts for multiple women while lying to your wife about your whereabouts. You used marital assets to fund extramarital affairs. That's not a mischaracterization. That's fraud. The hearing lasted 3 hours. By the end, Judge Morrison had ruled that both lawsuits had sufficient merit to proceed to trial. She'd denied my parents' motion to dismiss, and she'd issued a temporary restraining order preventing any of them from making public statements about Emily or me pending resolution of the case. Outside the courthouse, my mother tried to approach me, but Jennifer intercepted her. Mrs. Fletcher, the restraining order includes proximity restrictions. Please maintain distance from my clients. Rebecca, please, my mother said, her voice cracking. You're destroying this family. Can't you see that? Everything we built, all the respect we've earned in this community, you're tearing it down over a domestic dispute. Over fraud, I corrected. Over harassment. Over 3 years of lies and financial abuse. Over a pattern of victimizing women and then destroying their credibility. That's what I'm tearing down, Mother. The fact that you call it a domestic dispute shows you still don't understand what Nathan actually did. He made mistakes, she insisted. He's human. He's flawed, but he's still your brother. He's a predator, I said flatly. He targeted vulnerable women, manipulated them, used them, then destroyed them when they became inconvenient. Danielle lost her job. Sarah nearly had a nervous breakdown. Melissa is facing her own legal consequences for accepting gifts she should have reported. And Emily lost 8 years of her life to a man who was lying to her every single day. Those aren't mistakes, Mother. That's a pattern of deliberate cruelty. My father stepped forward, his face red with fury. You sanctimonious little... Mr. Fletcher, Jennifer warned. Any verbal attack in front of witnesses will be added to the evidence record. He stepped back, but his eyes burned with hatred. You've always been jealous of Nathan. Always wanted to tear him down because you couldn't measure up. Well, congratulations, Rebecca. You finally succeeded in destroying your brother's life. I hope you're satisfied. I'm not destroying Nathan's life, I said calmly. I'm documenting it. Everything I've presented in court is true, documented, and verifiable. Nathan destroyed his own life by choosing to be a fraud and a liar. I'm just making sure everyone knows what he actually is, instead of what you've spent 30 years pretending he is. Emily stepped forward, standing beside me in solidarity. Margaret Thomas, you need to understand something. Rebecca didn't create this situation. She reported it. Nathan created it by cheating on me for 3 years, defrauding me financially, and victimizing multiple women. You made it worse by attacking Rebecca when she tried to tell the truth. Every consequence Nathan is facing now, he earned through his own choices. You're both going to regret this, my mother said, her voice shaking with rage and tears. When you're alone, with no family, no support system, you'll realize what you've thrown away for the sake of being right. I'd rather be alone and honest than supported by people who value comfortable lies over integrity, I replied. We turned and walked away, leaving my parents standing on the courthouse steps, their perfect family finally exposed for the fraud it had always been. The trial began on a Monday in late March, the kind of gray spring day where winter refuses to release its grip. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, almost intimate, which somehow made it worse. There was nowhere to hide from my parents' accusing stares, from Nathan's hollow-eyed desperation. Jennifer had prepared me thoroughly, but nothing could really prepare you for testifying against your own family. I took the stand in a navy suit, my hands steady despite the nausea rolling through my stomach. Miss Fletcher, Jennifer began, please describe for the court what happened on October 15th when you saw your brother with his assistant at the Meridian Hotel. I recounted the evening in detail, meeting my client for dinner, spotting Nathan and Melissa in the corner booth. Approaching their table, Nathan's panicked explanation about the Henderson account. I described his hand on her knee, the intimate way they'd been laughing, the look that passed between them when I interrupted. "What did you do with this information?" Jennifer asked. "I told my parents the next day. I thought they'd want to know their son was jeopardizing his marriage." "And how did they respond?" I looked directly at my mother as I answered. "My mother told me I was trying to destroy Nathan because I was jealous of his success. She said I'd seen a work dinner and was turning it into something sordid." My father laughed and said if Nathan needed to take his assistant to dinner to close deals, that was just business. "Did anyone believe you?" "No. My parents convinced Emily that I was lying. They convinced the rest of the family that I was unstable. They banned me from Thanksgiving and Christmas for refusing to apologize for telling the truth." Roland Crest, my parents' attorney, stood for cross-examination. He was good at his job, I'd give him that. He tried to paint me as a bitter sister who'd always resented Nathan's success, who'd fabricated evidence to tear him down. But Jennifer had prepared me for every attack. "Miss Fletcher, isn't it true that you've had professional difficulties that coincided with your brother's promotions?" "I've had a stable career progression in my field," I replied calmly. "What I haven't had is parents who acknowledge my achievements because they're too busy worshiping Nathan. You've made serious accusations against your family based on circumstantial evidence. I've made documented accusations based on bank records, hotel receipts, Instagram photos, and a recording of my parents plotting to destroy my reputation. That's not circumstantial. That's factual." He tried another angle. "You claim your parents enabled your brother, but isn't it possible they simply didn't see what you saw, that they trusted their son? They heard the recording where Nathan admitted to the affairs and they still defended him," I said. "They saw the receipts, the hotel charges, the jewelry purchases, and they still called me a liar. That's not trust, Mr. Crest. That's willful blindness because the truth was inconvenient to the image they'd spent decades building." When Emily took the stand, she was devastating. She methodically detailed 8 years of marriage to a man she'd never really known. The financial manipulation, the gaslighting, the discovery of the secret bank account. She produced text messages where Nathan had explicitly told Melissa he was planning to leave Emily once his divorce settlement was favorable. Messages dated 6 months before Emily had any idea there were marital problems. "Did Nathan ever explain why he maintained a secret account for 3 years?" Jennifer asked. "He said it was for emergencies," Emily replied, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "But the only emergencies it funded were hotel rooms with other women and jewelry he couldn't explain to his wife." Danielle Reed testified via video call, describing how Nathan had pursued her relentlessly, promising her a future together, then systematically destroying her career when she became inconvenient. She showed emails Nathan had edited to make her look obsessed, text messages he'd saved out of context to create a narrative of harassment. "He told HR I was threatening to destroy his reputation if he didn't sleep with me," Danielle said, her voice breaking. The exact opposite of what actually happened. And because he was their top performer and I was junior analyst, they believed him without question. I was escorted from the building by security. My professional reputation in the pharmaceutical industry was destroyed. I had to change careers entirely. Sarah Kim's testimony was similar. Another woman convinced that Nathan loved her. Another woman discarded when she asked for the commitment he'd promised. Another woman whose professional life was damaged when she tried to hold him accountable. "He has a playbook," Sarah said bitterly. "Promise them the moon, make them feel special, isolate them from people who might question the relationship, then discard them viciously when they become problematic. And if they try to fight back, destroy their credibility." It worked because everyone wanted to believe Nathan was the golden boy his parents had always claimed he was. The recording of my parents planning to defame me was played multiple times throughout the trial. Each time, jurors' faces hardened a little more. You could see them processing the casual cruelty, the calculated malice, the complete absence of concern for my well-being or reputation. When my mother took the stand, she tried to claim the recording was taken out of context, that she'd never intended to actually spread rumors about my mental health, that it was just frustrated venting about a difficult family situation. Judge Morrison didn't buy it. "Mrs. Fletcher, in this recording, you and your husband specifically discuss documenting false evidence of your daughter's erratic behavior and potential substance abuse. You discuss coordinating with other family members to spread this narrative. At what point does venting become conspiracy to commit defamation?" My mother's lawyer tried to intervene, but the damage was done. The jury had heard my parents calmly plotting to destroy my reputation to protect their son's image, and no amount of legal maneuvering could erase that. Nathan's testimony was a disaster. He tried to claim all his affairs were emotional connections that never became physical, a lie immediately contradicted by hotel records and testimony from the women involved. He tried to claim the secret bank account was for legitimate purposes, then couldn't explain why those purposes required hiding the account from his wife. He tried to claim he'd been planning to surprise Emily with the Cartier bracelet, then couldn't produce any evidence of this plan or explain why Melissa had been wearing it. By the time closing arguments came, the outcome felt inevitable. Jennifer stood before the jury, her voice clear and unwavering. This case is about truth versus image. For years, Nathan Fletcher maintained an image as a successful executive, devoted husband, and golden child. His parents supported this image so completely that they were willing to destroy their daughter's reputation to preserve it. But images are fragile things. They shatter when confronted with documented facts. The facts are these. Nathan Fletcher defrauded his wife of $47 over 3 years. He conducted multiple extramarital affairs, lying to his wife about his whereabouts and spending their joint assets on other women. When caught, he coordinated with his parents to defame the people who exposed his behavior. He victimized multiple women and destroyed their careers when they demanded accountability. His parents, Thomas and Margaret Fletcher, didn't just enable this behavior, they actively participated in it. They funded Nathan's affairs with substantial cash gifts they knew he couldn't explain. When Rebecca Fletcher reported what she'd witnessed, they called her a liar, banned her from family events, and plotted to destroy her credibility by falsely claiming she was mentally ill. This isn't a family dispute. This is a pattern of fraud, abuse, and conspiracy documented over years. The defendants aren't victims of vindictive lawsuits. They're perpetrators of systematic harm who are finally being held accountable for their choices. Roland Crest's closing argument tried to appeal to sympathy, painting my parents as protective parents who'd made judgment errors while defending their son, Nathan, as a flawed man who'd made mistakes, but didn't deserve to have his entire life destroyed. But his words rang hollow against the mountain of evidence Jennifer had presented. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, their faces were set in expressions of grim certainty. In the case of Emily Fletcher versus Nathan Fletcher on the count of fraud, we find for the plaintiff. On the count of emotional distress, we find for the plaintiff. On the count of financial abuse, we find for the plaintiff. The awards were devastating. Emily was granted $350,000 in damages plus half of all marital assets, including the house Nathan had insisted was his alone. She was awarded full ownership of their joint accounts, and Nathan was ordered to pay her legal fees. In the case of Rebecca Fletcher versus Thomas and Margaret Fletcher, on the count of defamation, we find for the plaintiff. On the count of conspiracy to commit defamation, we find for the plaintiff. My parents were ordered to pay $150,000 in damages, issue a public apology acknowledging their false statements, and pay my legal fees. Additionally, Judge Morrison imposed a permanent restraining order preventing them from making any public statements about me without prior legal review. In the case of Rebecca Fletcher versus Nathan Fletcher, on the count of defamation, we find for the plaintiff. Nathan was ordered to pay an additional $75,000 to me and barred from making any contact. As the verdict was read, I watched my parents' faces crumble. My mother covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. My father sat rigid, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Nathan looked like someone had hollowed him out, leaving only a shell behind. Judge Morrison addressed them directly before closing the proceedings. The defendants in these cases chose image over integrity, comfort over truth, and loyalty to a lie over justice for victims. The consequences they're now facing are the direct result of those choices. This court hopes that this verdict sends a clear message that fraud, harassment, and coordinated defamation will not be tolerated, even when committed within families. Outside the courthouse, Emily and I faced a small crowd of reporters. Jennifer had prepared a statement, but Emily wanted to say something herself. For years, I was told to trust my instincts less than I trusted appearances, she said, her voice clear in the spring air. I was told that questioning my husband made me a bad wife, that demanding honesty made me difficult. Rebecca Fletcher lost her entire family because she refused to participate in comfortable lies. Today, the truth was finally heard, and justice was finally served. I hope other people in similar situations see this outcome and find the courage to demand truth over image. My phone had been buzzing throughout the verdict. Messages from family members I hadn't spoken to in months, some congratulating me, some expressing shock, some trying to maintain neutrality. My aunt called immediately after we left the courthouse. "Rebecca, I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your mother called me last month, tried to get me to sign something saying you'd shown signs of mental instability years ago. I told her to go to hell. I can't believe she actually tried to destroy you like that." Other relatives followed, confirming that my parents had contacted them with similar requests, asking them to provide statements about my supposed emotional problems, my jealousy of Nathan, my history of making false accusations. Most had refused. A few had initially agreed before the evidence made them reconsider. The scope of my parents' campaign against me was staggering. That evening, Emily and I went to dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown, our first meal together without the weight of pending litigation hanging over us. We ordered wine, good wine, and toasted to truth and justice, and the painful freedom of being disowned by people who valued lies over integrity. "What happens now?" Emily asked. "Where do we go from here?" "Forward," I said simply. "We've spent months looking backward, documenting the past, proving what happened. Now we get to look forward and build something real. Do you think they'll ever understand what they did? Your parents, I mean." I considered this, swirling the wine in my glass. No, they'll always see themselves as the victims. In their narrative, I'm the villain who destroyed a happy family over petty jealousy. Nathan's the tragic victim of vindictive women. They're the wounded parents caught in the crossfire. The truth doesn't matter to them as much as maintaining that narrative. That must hurt, Emily said softly. It does, I admitted, but less than continuing to participate in their lie would have. I lost a family, Emily, but I kept something more important. What's that? Myself. 6 months after the trial, I stood in my new apartment, unpacking boxes in a space that finally felt like mine. The condo I'd bought was modest, but had beautiful natural light, hardwood floors, and most importantly, no memories of family dinners where truth was negotiable. Emily had moved into a townhouse 3 blocks away. We'd become not just allies, but genuine friends, the kind forged in shared trauma and victory. She was thriving in ways I'd never seen during her marriage to Nathan, taking a job at a nonprofit organization, cutting her hair short, rediscovering interests Nathan had subtly discouraged over the years. The financial awards from the lawsuit had been paid, though not without my parents attempting every legal maneuver to delay or reduce them. Their public apology, required by the court, had been published in the local newspaper, a formal acknowledgement that their statements about my mental health and character had been false and defamatory. My mother had called it the final humiliation, according to my aunt. I called it accountability. Nathan had lost everything systematically and completely. His career in pharmaceutical sales was finished, his reputation destroyed so thoroughly that he'd moved to a different state. The house he'd insisted on buying was sold to pay Emily's settlement, and the proceeds hadn't been enough. He'd declared bankruptcy 6 weeks after the trial, his $47,000 secret account drained by legal fees and court-ordered payments. Melissa had been fired from Davidson Pharmaceuticals for accepting undisclosed gifts from a colleague, a violation of company ethics policy. Her relationship with Nathan had ended the moment he could no longer afford to lavish gifts on her. She'd tried to sell the Cartier bracelet, but Emily's lawyer had filed a motion claiming it was marital property purchased with joint funds. The judge agreed, and the bracelet was sold with proceeds going to Emily's settlement. The domino effect of Nathan's exposure continued to ripple outward. 2 more women had come forward with stories of affairs and professional retaliation, though they were outside the statute of limitations for legal action. Their testimonies had been published in a local investigative journalism piece, The Golden Boy, How One Family's Denial Enabled Years of Abuse. The article had gone viral within the pharmaceutical industry, becoming a case study in how corporate culture and family enabling can allow predators to operate unchecked. My parents had become pariahs in their own social circle. The country club where my father had golfed for 20 years quietly didn't renew his membership. My mother's charity board asked her to step down after the public apology was published, citing concerns about the organization's reputation. Friends they'd known for decades stopped calling, stopped inviting them to dinner parties, stopped pretending the facade was intact. According to my aunt, who maintained minimal contact with them, they'd become bitter recluses, convinced they were the real victims of a conspiracy rather than architects of their own downfall. My mother told people I'd always been troubled, that they'd done their best with me, that the courts had been biased against them. Even now, even after everything, they couldn't admit the truth. But the truth had its own power. I'd received dozens of messages from women who'd read about the trial, women who'd been gaslit by their families when they reported abuse, women who'd been told to value family harmony over their own integrity. They thanked me for fighting, for refusing to stay quiet, for proving that sometimes breaking a family apart is necessary when the family is built on lies. One afternoon in late September, I was having coffee with Emily when she showed me an Instagram message she'd received from Danielle Reed. "I got a job offer," the message read. "A good one, at a competitor of Davidson Pharmaceuticals. They'd seen the article about Nathan and specifically wanted to hire me because they valued people who spoke truth even at personal cost. I start next month. Thank you for giving me back my professional reputation." Emily's eyes were bright with tears. "We did this, Rebecca. We helped her get her life back. She helped herself by being willing to testify," I replied. "We just made sure people heard her." That evening, Tyler came over to help me hang artwork in my new living room. We'd been dating for 9 months now, our relationship deepening through the chaos of the trial. He'd seen me at my worst, angry, bitter, doubting myself, and he'd never flinched. "Your mom tried to contact me last week," he said casually, as he measured wall space for a frame. "Through the police department, left a message saying she was concerned about your well-being and asking if I'd noticed signs of instability." I felt ice in my stomach. "What did you do?" "Forwarded it to Jennifer, who sent another cease and desist letter reminding them that attempting to damage your reputation through third parties violates the court order." He looked at me seriously. "Rebecca, they're never going to stop trying to control the narrative. You need to accept that." "I know," I said quietly. Part of me keeps hoping they'll have some moment of clarity, some realization that they were wrong, but that's never going to happen. "No," he agreed, "because that would require them to fundamentally reconsider their entire worldview. It's easier for them to believe you're crazy than to admit they enabled Nathan's abuse for years. The permanent loss of my parents, my brother, the family I'd grown up in, still ached sometimes. There were moments I caught myself thinking about calling my mother, wanting to share some small piece of news the way daughters do. Then I'd remember her voice on that recording, calmly plotting to destroy my credibility, and the impulse would die. But new relationships were growing in the space the old ones had occupied. My aunt had become closer, making a point to call weekly and invite me to family events my parents weren't attending. Cousins I'd rarely spoken to had reached out, several admitting they'd always found Nathan arrogant, but had been afraid to say so. Emily's family had essentially adopted me, treating me like the sister Emily had gained by losing her husband. On a Sunday morning in late October, exactly 1 year after I'd first seen Nathan with Melissa at the Meridian Hotel, Emily and I drove to the lake where we'd decided to hold a private ceremony of sorts. We'd each written letters, everything we wanted to say to Nathan, to my parents, to ourselves about the trauma we'd endured and overcome. Standing at the water's edge, we read our letters aloud, then burned them, watching the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash. The smoke rose into the clear autumn sky, carrying away the last weight of their power over us. "I used to think family was everything," Emily said, watching the ashes scatter in the wind, "that blood bonds were sacred, that you should forgive anything because they're family. Now I know that's not true. Family should make you feel safe, not silent. Loved, not controlled. Valued, not diminished. You get to choose your family," I agreed. "Biology might give you relatives, but love and respect and truth create family. Everything else is just shared DNA and learned dysfunction." We drove back to the city, stopping at a farmer's market where Emily bought fresh flowers and I found homemade jam. Normal things, peaceful things, the kind of ordinary moments that had felt impossible a year ago when my entire world was collapsing under the weight of exposed lies. That evening, I had dinner at my apartment with Tyler, Emily, my aunt, and 2 colleagues from work who'd become close friends during the trial. We cooked together, laughed together, told stories that were real and unvarnished and true. No performance, no image to maintain, no lies to protect. As I looked around my small dining table at these people who'd chosen to be part of my life rather than demanded it by right of blood, I felt something settle in my chest. Not happiness, exactly. The trauma of the past year had been too profound for simple happiness. But peace, maybe. The peace of living in truth, even when that truth was painful. My phone buzzed with an email. A speaking request from a women's advocacy organization asking if I'd be willing to share my story at their annual conference. "We need voices like yours," the email read. "People willing to speak truth even when it costs them everything." I showed it to Emily, who smiled. "Are you going to do it?" "I think so," I said. "If telling my story helps even one person find the courage to demand truth from their family, it's worth it." "What will you tell them?" Tyler asked. I thought about the question, about everything I'd learned in the past year, about discovering that your family's love is conditional on your silence, about losing everything you thought defined you and learning you could survive that loss, about the hard-won freedom of refusing to participate in comfortable lies. I'll tell them that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most will be the ones who hurt you worst when you threaten their preferred narrative, I said slowly.